the fourth episode of the 6 Million Mile Show, and I'm your co-host, Crackerbox Jimmy.
And I am your other host. It's me. It's Trucker Toby.
Hello, Trucker Toby. Good to see you again. Where are you today?
I'm actually in Ohio, just on the south side of Cincinnati, or just north of Cincinnati at a rest area.
Oh, nice. It looks nice and sunny there. Before we get rolling too far into this, I just wanted to let everybody know that we now have a Patreon page. So I just want to invite everybody to pull a stool up to the horseshoe, get a cup of Joe, kick back and listen to us and, help us keep some fuel in the tank. Leave us a little tip there on Patreon if you wish. We would greatly appreciate it. It would help us keep this show going, keep you in the loop, help us to bring more stories about trucking and trucking culture to us. And speaking of trucking culture, Toby, what are we talking about today?
We do a lot of shows and we talk about our nostalgia a lot. One of the things that I'm the most nostalgic about is that thing right there. That's the microphone to my CB radio. And I got to thinking about it, and I'm like, CBs aren't as prevalent as they used to be back in your day and the majority of my career. Everybody had a CB. So I got to wondering how that happened. Well, my research showed me that in 1945, a guy named Al Gross invented the first CB radio. It was adopted by the United States military for use. And then in 1948, it was allowed to be made public. But it didn't really blow up until a movie. And that movie, if you remember back in the 70s and in the 80s, almost every car you saw on the road had a CB antenna. Every truck had a CB antenna. And most pickup trucks had a CB antenna. And the movie that started that boom as far as CBs was Smokey and the Bandit. And that made CB radios a household name. Today, though, we have a CB radio expert. Let me welcome to the show with Crackerbox Jimmy, Mike Panchula.
Hi, everybody, and thank you for asking me to be part of your show.
We love to have you here. And just so everybody knows, Mike and I go way back. Way back. Back to January of 1975. We've known each other, and for all that time, Mike has always been into radios. Had a radio base station in his house, CVs in the cars. So, Mike, how did you get interested in radios? What brought you to CBs and ham?
Well, back in the mid-'70s, about 1975, actually it was late 1974, my dad and his buddies, his hunting buddies, decided they needed to be in contact on their way up to deer camp. So they all put CBs in their trucks. And, of course, I got into the truck and started playing with CB, and I was an instant addict. Back on Channel 12 in the old days in Flushing, where I grew up, where you could get on the radio at night and there'd be 300 or 400 or 500 people out there trying to use the band all at once. Great times.
Yeah. I remember. Toby, why don't you talk a little bit more about Smokey and the Bandit? Is that what brought you to CBs? Is that what introduced it to you?
Well, yes and no. I remember growing up in South Florida, where I'm from, I would see station wagons were a big thing. And, back in the 70s and early 80s, and you'd see all these CB antennas, and my mom would talk about, the code of the road and all that stuff. And she'd get on the radio and when we drive places or whatnot, and she talks. So, I was kind of acquainted with it, but I didn't really get into it until I started driving back in early, 2001. But my thought has always been, I used to tell my students this when I was an instructor, the CB radio was the first social media, because that thing right there let us know what we were looking at going ahead of us, what the weather was like, what traffic was like, what parking was like in truck stops, where to be on the lookout for accidents, this, that, and the other thing, and let the guys going on the other side of us, we could let them know what they were going to encounter. That was the first social media. That's how truck drivers, and back during the late 70s or mid 80s, people communicated on the road, hey, you got a bear up here 5 miles ahead of you. You got one there. You got he's got a captured on the side, or, you got a four-wheeler up here on the shoulder, or whatever the case may be. And then, of course, CB radios has its own vernacular, has its own language. Like my catchphrase is 10-10 on the side. Well, what's that mean in CB, language? It means I'm sitting on the side. It means I'm sitting to the side. I'm off.
Yeah, Mike.
I'm shaking the trees and raking the leaves.
And Toby, you're talking about it, being the first social media. Mike, tell Toby about some of those old coffee breaks and whatnot that we used to go to.
Oh, sure. Back in the 70s and possibly, I guess, sort of into the early 80s, there were a lot of local CB clubs and CB breaks where a local club or organization would ask everybody to show up at the local restaurant, and Coney Island, and 30 or 40 or 50 people would show up and talk about radio. It was a blast. We used to have a club out in Flushing where we had drawings every year where we'd give away radios and microphones and all sorts of. It was a great time. So many people involved in it.
And there was an etiquette. There was an
Very
etiquette
much so.
too. Yeah, most of the people were courteous enough to, hey, break 19, which, nobody really knows what that means. You go down the road and the radio's dead silent and you hear somebody going, break 19. You can't ask for a break if there's no conversation going on to be broken into. But that's a minor technical point. And Toby, you were talking about all the 10 codes and things. Did you use a lot of those? Because I use like 10-4, 10-20, 10-10. I didn't use many of them at all.
Over throughout the years, I was thinking about this yesterday. I used 10-4, 10-10, 10-20. It's just like just a handful of them, and if you actually buy a CB radio, there used to be, I don't know if about anymore. They used to have like in the back of the owner's manual, they had the CB call signs is what they call them. They're called call signs. They'd have the CB call signs, and it was always 10- something. And but no, I didn't use a lot of them like you, just a very few, a handful.
Because in some of the reading that I've been doing about old CBs, old CB culture, etc., it talked about how everything just kind of broke into chaos because of licensing requirements. And I remember, the point being that those 10 codes kind of fell by the side because the more people got on it, you just turn the thing on and don't know anything about the etiquette of the radio. You don't know to use the 10 codes. You don't know to how to properly conduct yourself. Like, Mike, did you back in the early days, you actually had your base station, you had a license, you had call numbers on that thing?
Yes, absolutely. Well, actually, when we first started out, it was my father's license because I was like 12. But but yes, we had a call sign, Kilo Alpha Foxtrot Zulu 7121.
Wow.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Now that's a ham. Now that's a ham operator identifier, correct?
No, not at all. That's a CB license. Okay. CBs were licenses. CBs were required to be licensed up until just a few years ago, where you had to apply to the FCC and get a CB license.
You were supposed to.
Yes, by law.
By law, you were supposed to. But in like the late 70s into early 80s, that just kind of died. Getting the licenses because nobody bothered, because you could just go down to Walmart, buy a CB, throw it in your van and in your pickup truck or your semi and just start going. But
like they used to say back then, there was 20 million CBers and 400 FCC agents. Why bother?
Yeah, exactly. I do remember the FCC coming into town on occasion and with their meters and looking for people running high output stations, linear amplifiers, is, let's see, if I remember right, CB is on the 11 meter band.
Yes.
Yeah. So what's that mean? What's that mean?
Well, it's 11 meters is basically it's telling you what frequency you're on. radio frequency is a broad spectrum from AM radio at the bottom all the way up to light. And it's all measured in frequency is measured in meters. In this case, the 11 meter band means we're about 27 megahertz. The amateur radio operators use meters to describe all of their bands, like the 80 meter band being 3.5 megahertz. The popular 10 meter band, which a lot of truckers use these days, is at 28 megahertz, just above the CB band.
On an 11 meter, average radio, what kind of distance can you get if you've got everything set up right? How far away should you be able to expect to talk?
Well, at a factory rating, a power rating of 4 watts output and a good antenna, you should be able to get 15, maybe 20 miles. But our atmosphere can give us interesting options. Sometimes the atmosphere gets charged up and signals can hit the atmosphere and bounce. This is what we call skip. And you can skip when the conditions are right, you can skip hundreds or even thousands of miles.
I have a question for you, Mike. All right. So now on average, it's been my experience that with our environment and going up and down the roads and everything, we're getting on average with a stock radio, like you said, we're only getting anywhere from 2 to 5 miles, typical range, send and receive. What affects that? I mean, aside from like your overall terrain, the other signals, electrical, frequencies on the road, other drivers using CBs, what affects that?
Well, all of those things will affect the radiation of your signal, but it's also got to do with your antenna, where on the vehicle your antenna might be mounted. And radios require ground planes. What that means is it has to have a plane of metal for the field of the radio waves to bounce off of. And that means in a truck, most of the metal's behind you, which means most of your signals going behind you. Which is interesting, considering most of the time truckers are trying to find out what's ahead of them, not what's behind them.
Well, right. And see, this truck has an internal antenna. I remember years ago, we used to have the externals on the side or, on the mirrors and whatnot. But the newer trucks, they're putting internal antennas, which now, so does that affect what you're talking about as well? I assume it would.
Yes, those antennas are very inefficient. Yes, they work, but I mean,
barely.
You can use a piece of wet string for an antenna. It's just not going to work very well.
Quick question. Oh, go ahead, Mike. Keep going.
Please go ahead.
Okay, well, with the internal antennas, wouldn't you have a problem setting the standing wave? I don't know if you can explain what standing wave is.
Well, standing wave is basically a measurement of the electrical match between your radio and your antenna. You have to have a good match, electrical match, to get good radiation.
SWR calibration is that what you're talking?
Exactly. Okay. Standing wave ratio is a measurement of it's a ratio of the power you have going out compared to the power you have coming back, because your antenna is not radiating that power. With those broadband internal antennas, they have a matching network, which means they'll match just about any signal. Any signal you can put into it, it's going to radiate. It's just not going to radiate very well.
Lovely. Well,
we all make sacrifices. There's, some things are more efficient than others.
What would you say? Okay, what would you say, Mike? Is if you're a new driver and you want a radio that is gonna give you power, and we'll get to a big radio in a second. What would you say is the best radio for the buck that a driver could buy to put in their truck right now?
That's a hard thing to measure. It all depends on what it is you're looking for. If you're just looking for all around good radio, I mean, with the truckers today, Galaxies and Rangers and Connex radios are very popular with truckers because they're capable of higher output. They have higher modulation. They have, of course, the Cobras and Midlands and Presidents will always be popular. They're the radios that most people have.
Well, Cobra was really the first one to come out into the public back in 48, I believe it was. So, I mean, that's why I asked. But see, I said we get to a big radio in a minute. Several years ago, more years than I care to count, I had a Galaxy 4400. Now that's a big radio, especially for a truck. Now, what you're talking about, that's a huge radio, but for a truck, that's a big radio. And I remember I was parked next to this guy in a truck stop, and it had that 150-watt inverter built into it, and it did this and it did that, and it did cartwheels and flips, and it cooked and it cleaned, and I mean, it did everything. And I had to have a custom antenna built for the back of the truck that would actually go over the top of the trailer for it to receive right. So were you saying all the signals behind us because of the metal? That makes perfect sense because of that antenna. Well, one night I'm sitting in a truck stop and I keyed up my mic, and the guy, this was before I had the custom antenna made. I keyed up my mic and I melted my fiberglass antennas.
I've seen it happen.
Yeah.
So I had to go get that custom antenna. Matter of fact, I got it at a CB shop in West Memphis, Arkansas.
So going back to the thing about the trailer being the ground plane, what can you do, if you're going to put the CB in the truck to make that signal go forward more? Is there anything you can do?
There's nothing really practical you can do. You can put your antenna at the back of your trailer. But that doesn't really work very well, especially if you're running double bottoms.
Yeah.
48 pair of 48-foot vans. Yeah, or if you drop trailers a lot. There's really no good way. The best way to do it is just to get the antenna as high up and as clear of the vehicle as you can.
Like I had with the one that was behind on my headache rack that went above the top of the trailer and the truck, so it got all that signal coming in and it down and through the cable and all that good stuff. I get you now. Makes perfect sense in that sense. Now that you explain it to an idiot.
No, that's really interesting. Yeah. There's an old story, Mike, was when years ago we were talking about ground planes and sending skip. And Mike had this fantastic idea. And it was a really good idea and it worked really well. We were at a lake and Mike drove his car down so the rims, the front rims of the vehicle were making contact with the surface of the lake. And man, would that radio talk. We were in Michigan, outside, like south of Flint area, and we were talking to Texas with no problem.
Yeah, water is a great conductor of electricity, so it makes perfect sense. The metal of the rims touching the water. Yeah, I mean the whole lake was your antenna.
Oh, and I had the antenna in those days too. I had a 7-foot fire stick, so yeah, all kinds of antenna.
So do you still run a radio, Mike?
Oh, yes. Well, I don't have a CB in my vehicle right now. I do have a tram base station set up at my base. I am also a licensed ham radio operator. So I have an amateur radio station set up in my house as well. And I have a multi-band amateur radio in my vehicle.
Okay.
That's cool.
Okay. So here's the important question. This is what every driver is going to want to know. This is the question that they're going to want the answer to. Okay, Mike, I'm a truck driver. I want a radio that's going to give me power for send and receive. I want a radio that's going to make sure I'm heard and is clear. What type of radio do I need to buy and what do I need to have done to it? And the reason I ask what do I need to have done to it is because over the years, you hear drivers say, oh, I got to get my radio peaked and tuned. What exactly does that mean? So that's a two-part question for you. What do I need to buy as a new driver? And what does it mean to have a radio peaked and tuned?
Well, to tune a radio means to align it electrically for peak operation, for maximum operation. To peak a radio means to get in and turn the power up beyond its specifications. But when you do that, you throw everything else out of alignment. So when you peak a radio, you're not doing yourself any favors. Your best bet, if you want to run higher power, is to run standard power from a radio into a linear amplifier. Not that I'm endorsing such. But yeah, if you want to run higher power, that's going to be your best bet, is to run a standard power radio. There's a lot of good radios around. Like you mentioned, the Galaxy, the Ranger 2910 is real popular. Connex radios are very popular with truckers. Because of course the Connex, well, it's very loud. It's very loud.
Now, okay, I have a question. So now, again, here I'm learning here, man, and this is the cool part about it. I've been doing this almost 23 years, and I don't know a lot about this thing right here, but I'm learning. And so this is stuff that new drivers and even older drivers and drivers like me can learn some stuff. All right. So what good is it going to do me to buy a big radio like a Connex and have a internal antenna? No, that means I'll to get to use that radio to its most effectiveness, I'll have to have an external antenna with coax, correct?
Yes. Yeah. For maximum performance, you want to have an external antenna, like I said, as high on the vehicle as possible.
Want to know what happened to that custom antenna I had made?
Yes.
My co-driver hit a tree limb, snapped it right off 3 days after I bought it.
Oh yeah.
Oh.
I've heard a similar story here recently. I sold some radio equipment to a guy downstate here in Michigan, and was talking with this cat. He builds linears and high power antennas for truck drivers. And he said he's built this 5,000 watt antenna for this truck driver, installed the radio, linear, and extra alternator in his truck for him. Spent $2,000 on this radio antenna and an amplifier, and 2 days later he snapped the antenna off.
Okay. Let me back up here. This guy does this professionally, right?
Yes. Well, it's a hobby,
Okay.
but yes, he
Okay.
does pretty brisk business at it.
Well, I was just going to say now, is he looking for more business? Because if he is, maybe we can put his contact info with this video and direct people to him. Because look, finding a good CB guy and a good antenna guy is really hard nowadays. It used to be they were in a lot of places, but like I always had my work done in West Memphis, but the shop's closed. You know, there's not a lot of good CB shops. There's a lot of trashy CB shops, but there's not a lot of good quality CB guys out there anymore. So, hey, if you've got one and he's willing, let us know, man. We will definitely put him out there.
Well, having not spoken to him in advance, I don't want to put his information.
I understand completely, but I'm just saying, I understand completely, but I'm letting you know, hey, and if he says yes, please pass on the info, because I will definitely put it up there, because finding a good CB guy is hard nowadays, man. It really is, because they just basically, okay, like this is a Road King, and it was, I got it for free. It was a gift, but it's stock, never had nothing done to it. And it's basically what they do is they say, okay, take it out of the box, plug and play. There you go. You're set up. And we know better. You definitely know better. Crackerbox knows better. I know better, but who do you trust? I remember years ago, Cobra came out with a new CB that had never been done before. It was their most advanced model at the time, and I took it to get it worked on, and nobody would touch it because there was no schematics out for it available yet.
Wow. Well, a lot of the problem with new radios too, the very recent radios, especially those coming out of say Myanmar, places like that, is they're made with components that can't be replaced or repaired. Whereas old radios, if you blew a transistor, you could pop it out, solder in a new transistor. Nowadays, the boards are modular, so if the radio blows up, you essentially have to throw it away and buy a new radio.
And that could get expensive.
Very much so, yeah.
Talking about the radio shops, running on the East Coast, I ran back and forth between like the Buffalo area into Ohio, out to Boston, down to New York City for years. And we all talked about this. Well, and I was pulling 2 trailers too most of that time, 248s. But a lot of us ran something that we called Randy radios. And Randy was this guy. He had a CB shop operating out of a little mobile home on the backside of this truck stop parking lot in west of Erie. I forget the name of the town, that little stretch of Pennsylvania between the New York and Ohio state lines. Excuse me. He had a radio shop there, and man, did he do good work. You'd take your radio into him, and he would, peak and tune it, but he would make sure that the radio, everything was right. When, like Mike was talking about, you turn the power up and it throws everything else off, he'd go through and, he not running more than about 10 watts. Not like putting a gigantic linear on your truck. 8 to 10 watts is where he told everybody, was where he liked to put them, and made all the appropriate adjustments. And you could easily talk 10, 15 miles in the truck with that, which is what you really want. I always thought, you need an effective range of about 5 miles.
Minimum
Minimum
5 miles. Yeah,
five
I
miles
agree.
to be able to know what's going on, to be able to talk to people, and to really use the CB in a truck for what it was intended for, instead of, finding, where's the cute waitresses and all this other things that you can do on
You
a
mean that's not what it
CB.
was intended for?
Well, it's definitely for that driver who doesn't have his panties on.
Wow, good thing I can edit this show. No, but
That's been a staple saying on that
yes.
radio for
Oh, I
40
know.
years.
I know.
That's why it's in there.
There's a lot of
That's why
things
I
that were
put it in there.
staples on the radio that probably really shouldn't make
Oh
public.
man, on the
But
backside of, which one is it? It's
One
this
of them.
album. Yeah, the backside of this album. I can't take it down because it's attached to the wall, but it has a whole list on the backside of the album cover of CB terminology. Not the 10 codes or anything, like just what truckers used to call things. And half of them are no longer socially acceptable things to say.
I bet one of them I know for sure.
Yeah, I bet we can all think of a whole bunch of them. And just like reading down this thing, it's like, oh my God, society has moved to a point where, these things, for good reasons, aren't necessarily acceptable in normal conversation. But it was just that culture of the time. And, back in mid-70s, everybody's, there was a truck stop in New York called Betty Beaver's. You
and
could
that's
not.
probably all you should say about that.
Yes, yeah. You could not name a restaurant Betty Beaver's truck stop anymore. It just
No.
would not fly,
No.
And all that stuff's on the back of that album cover. But talking about what the CB, in my view, why I had a CB in the truck was to find out what was going on, keep my ears on, just to be 10-10 on the side and listening. Then if something comes up, somebody has a question, hey, what's going on here? Then if you're paying attention, you can give somebody a good bear report. You can give them a weather report, especially like up in New York in the wintertime. You'd be driving along. It's sunny, clear skies, but in 15 miles, you're going to hit a Band of Lake effect. And it would be really nice to know you're going to hit that before you start seeing the flakes fly.
Well,
Yeah,
there's a lot of other things too I'm sorry, Toby.
No, you're the expert, man. Please educate me. I'm listening. I'm all in. I've got my ears on.
All right, got those ears on. Updating road conditions, weather, checkpoints, stuff like that. Truckers always need to know that, but it's also stuff like do you know where I can get some tire repair, or I can get some food, or where I can get a hot shower. I mean, there's a lot of things that truckers need to be able to find out.
I don't know if you just saw that, Crackerbox, what just happened.
I saw you looking amazed and pointing. Squirrel?
I'm parked on the
Shiny
on-ramp
object?
of a rest area.
Yeah.
The entrance ramp. A car just went by me going the wrong direction down the on-ramp.
Oh no.
Of this rest area.
Oh no.
And I was pointing to try to get them to turn back.
Oh no.
Oh boy. Okay.
Oh boy. Okay. Well,
you're right. You're right. You're 100% right, man. And there's always something that we can be passing on to other drivers. The weather, bear reports, traffic reports, and a lot of back in the old days, a few years ago, customers had these too, and you had to have one so that they could communicate with you. Hey, all right, hey, whatever company you drive for, truck side, pull in the dock number, whatever, And so they were an integral part of what we do out here. They really were.
Because you
CB
could
radio was life. It was a
you could
lifeline, man.
warn people that somebody's getting on the expressway the wrong way out of a rest area. I'd
Exactly.
be on that radio
Yeah.
going, hey, southbound, you got somebody getting on going the wrong direction, and everybody's going to know, and everybody's going to see what's going on. But going back to what you were saying about the customers, there was a Genesee Cream Ale brewery in Rochester, New York, and you had to go into that place and find a parking spot and get on. Oh, I forget what channel it was. Like it doesn't matter. Like get on channel 14 and shout for the Yellow Submarine. And the Yellow Submarine was the guy in the loading office, and you got your door assignments. If you did not have a CB, you were out of luck, because you
Yep.
couldn't walk from the parking lot to the office. It was too far away, and they wouldn't let you hang out there. There wasn't a phone. You had to get on there and make that whole contact, do that whole transaction through the CB. And if you didn't have one or yours was down, you had to possibly find somebody that would be nice enough to come wake you up, because you'd be at that brewery for like 14 hours at a shot. You had to find somebody that was going to be nice enough to come wake you up when they were hollering at you and let you use their radio. That it was an important thing. It was an important thing.
And it's a part of the history of this industry. It's been a huge part of who we are for 50 years, man. Going on anyway, and or more. But like I said, it didn't get super popular till the 70s. But it's just it's crazy to me. Mike, you tell us, what is it about the radio that keeps you involved all these years later when the popularity is declining?
Interaction. Just to be the ability to get out there and meet people and have conversation and just get to make new friends. That's why I got into amateur radio. And it was CB that led me into that. I love getting on the radio and talking with people. You never know what you're going to learn.
Back in the old days, and Jim can probably speak to this. You'd sit in a truck stop, and they always, back a few years ago, you had to drive 10 hours and take an 8-hour break, and they'd say, oh, you got to be in a sleeper berth 8 hours. Well, yeah, my logbook might say I'm in a sleeper berth, but that don't mean I'm not sitting back there in a sleeper because I got an extra long cord on my CB mic and I'm back there running my mouth, because that's what we used to do, man. We used to sit in the trucks and just gab. And talk to other drivers, or we'd come out of the truck stop after having supper, go out, coloring our coloring books a little bit, and then hop on that CB radio up there, and we would talk to drivers, and just that's what we did, man. It's a part of the culture of who we are.
And I think that's a lot more important part of the culture than, sure, it's nice being able to get the road conditions, but you just need social interaction. You just need someone to talk to. Sometimes it's 3 a.m. and you're tired and your eyelids are getting heavy, and you need that voice in your head saying, hey, driver.
Yeah. So you talk about the news, talk about the weather, talk about something, just somebody to run with, find somebody going your direction. And, going coast to coast, a lot of times you'd find somebody going your direction that you get along with on the CB, and you're both kind of going to the same place. So you'd run across Illinois and Iowa and Nebraska together, and then they keep going. Yeah, Toby, go ahead.
Years ago, I was running across Kentucky. I was going west in Kentucky. I think it was on 64, but don't quote me on that. And about 2:00 in the morning, there's a driver sitting up on the interstate, and I'm running along, and I'm getting closer to this guy than I thought I should be, until I realized he was sitting still.
Oh, no.
Middle of the road, 2-lane interstate with his 4-ways on. And I hollered at him on the CB, driver, you okay? And my hand to God, you can't make this stuff up. This is what this driver said. He said, yeah, I'm just waiting for this train to finish crossing. If you recall, I said I was on the interstate.
Yeah, sounds like someone hadn't gotten a whole lot of sleep.
Yeah, well, I said, so I got up there because I'm talking to him. I'm getting closer. I'm like, well, driver, I'm about to hit that crossing there. Hopefully that train's gone when I get there. And I convinced him the train was gone.
Oh
And I
man.
walk,
Wow.
I walked him down to the next truck stop or the next rest area
Mm-hmm.
and put him to bed. And that was how I
Mm-hmm.
did it.
Mm-hmm.
Very
But
good.
that goes along with what you guys were just
Hmm.
talking about. I mean, yeah, you driving along, you're tired. Man, I need somebody to talk to. Something, but sticking my head out the window and driving ain't working because I can't see where I'm going. You know, um, so the radio was our guy. It was our lifeline back then, man, and it
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
still is sometimes.
Absolutely.
Hey,
Mm-hmm.
definitely.
I remember I was coming across, oh God, someplace on 80. Who knows? It all blends together. But there was a really good accident up ahead. And everybody was getting in the left lane, and some trucks are trying to get in the right lane. But I knew for miles that I needed to be in the left lane to get around what was going on. So I just, yeah, because I had my radio on, didn't have it on very loud, but I just had it on and I was paying attention to what all the chatter was. And I knew and watched everybody else that had, you could tell who had the radio on and who didn't, because the guys with the radio was on are all in the left lane. And here goes everybody by in the right lane. And about every 2 or 3 minutes, you'd hear somebody key up the mic and go, "What's going on? What's going on up ahead?" A couple of minutes later, "What's going on?" And I finally got tired of hearing it. And some guy says, keys up, "What's going on?" I said, "What's happening here, hand, is an object lesson in why you should always have your radio on." Nobody said a
You don't have to have
word.
a.
It was just dead silent.
I was coming through a construction zone years ago, and you know how drivers can be. We run our mouths. That's what we do.
It
And
is.
I was doing the speed limit. Of course, I really was doing the speed limit in a construction zone. I swear.
Mm-hmm.
And I was still new, so I didn't know any better. And drivers behind me were complaining and complaining, and speed up, speed up, speed up. And I'm like, if y'all keep it up, I'll slow down. And I don't know how many trucks back this old boy was, but he was an older driver. He says, "You know what, Han? You're doing just fine the way you're going. You keep on a going. You don't slow down none. You just keep on a getting it." But yeah, I mean, that was if drivers, mine's on at all times. Mine's on
Mm-hmm.
at all times, and it's not on high. It's just enough for me to hear it. But you can yourself when somebody keys up and says something important, it's going to be louder than the static, I guess, or the
Mm-hmm.
noise that's on there already. So that might be important, and whether it is or not, you'll determine after they shut their mouth. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Well,
it's I miss I miss the old days of having
mhm.
drivers on the radio. I really do.
Hmm.
And one of the arguments against using the CB, a lot of the newer drivers, everybody's got GPS now, and you've got, yeah, we know where we all see the videos of where following GPS will put you in your truck. But they've got GPS to follow to know where they're going, and the GPS will show you that there's a traffic jam going on up ahead, blah blah blah. Um, there's just all the connection, the community building, the community chatting, the keeping you awake. Guys are doing it with audio books on their phone, streaming an audio book. There's various apps that are going to show you all kinds of travel related info, weather information, all this stuff on the cell phone. And that's just fine. There's not a problem. A lot of the information goes faster, but it's really comes down to the lack of a human connection. Where are you're going to talk to somebody that maybe knows more than you about something about the truck, maybe knows a little bit more about how to deal with the weather, how to deal with this thing. You learn a lot from talking on the CB, listening to the other drivers. You get information and you get knowledge that you can't get by using an app, by using GPS, by using all these satellite tracking things. You're missing out on a level of instruction that just doesn't come with a non-human device. You know, it's
I agree. You know, I've had many students say, "Oh, I'm not going to buy a CB radio." Well, why won't you buy a CB radio? Because I got a cell phone, brother. I'm going to tell you what. When you lose service on that signal on that cell phone,
Mm-hmm.
and Google and the Maps app that you have, or the traffic app that you have, or the weather app that you have goes down, if you don't have one of these,
gonna
you
be
could be in
lost.
a whole world of trouble.
Hmm. Hmm.
Back a few years ago, a solar storm shut down the power across, what was it, like 19 states,
Hmm.
including of course cell towers. If you don't have that cell phone, you're not going to have that GPS. If you don't have a radio, you're not going to have any backup.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's we've become slaves to the technology, and I understand how the
Mhm.
technology fits in with what we do and how it can make our lives easier to a point. But irregardless, even if you have all that, this right here is still in its own way a necessity. Is it phasing out? Yeah, but not because it doesn't have a community. It's because drivers aren't buying them anymore. Why aren't
I
they
beg to
buying them?
differ. I beg to
Okay.
differ. And the reason I
No,
say that
please.
is my business partner and I do very brisk business in used CBs, as well as linears, SWR meters, microphones, frequency counters, and probably 90% of the mobile radios we sell are to truckers. I just sold a Connex
Well, that's
last
good to
week.
know. That's good to know. We need to talk about a new radio for my truck.
Mhm.
That is good to know, man, because I fear losing that as a driver.
Mhm.
This is a part of who we are. It's not a passing fad. It's not a phase that we're going through. This is connected to the roots of who we are as an industry.
Mhm.
I don't ever want to see us lose it. I really don't.
Hmm.
I agree
Hmm.
completely.
And I know that you know, Mike's business in CBs is old radios, vintage radios, and not quite so old, but does a lot of business in the older style CBs that have the replaceable parts. You know,
Mhm.
so yeah, if you just want a radio that you're going to throw, like we were talking about earlier, you just want, you know, spend a few bucks on a simple radio that you turn on and it's going to last a little while and you're not going to use it very much, sure. But if you want to use it as a tool, then like Mike's the guy to talk to. They've got, oh, you know, like the old 23 channel CBs and all the good radios with the interchangeable parts, something that you could take to an electronic shop and have it repaired instead of
Mhm.
just throwing it out. And there's an awful lot of value in those better built radios. So if you're any driver out there that's thinking, you know, new driver thinking about getting a CB, spend the money on a decent radio, talk to somebody in a CB shop or radio shop. I'm sure at the end we'll get some contact info for Mike and find somebody to talk
Do
to.
some research.
Yeah,
Just
do some
something. Yeah,
research.
I agree.
Yeah, yeah. Get a good radio. Get one that you can repair.
Well,
And
that's like I
yeah,
said, this one was free. That's why I use it.
yep,
But
yep.
I do
Free
want a
is
different.
good.
Nothing wrong with free, brother.
No.
But I do want a new one. I do want a new one. I just don't know what I want. And maybe talking with Mike and whatnot can help me make the decision on what I want. I'm not so sure I want to melt antennas anymore.
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
don't need all that.
Well, you know, I was thinking while we were chatting, talking earlier about the standing wave, the SWR matching. Depending on what kind of environment you're driving through, you know, you get ice on the antennas. That's going to change your standing wave ratio. And the
Mhm.
reason that's important, I've burned up a couple radios because the standing wave ratio was incorrect. And the radio, for whatever, I don't understand all the technical things to the degree that Mike does. The power I was putting out wasn't radiating, so it flows backwards back into the radio, and that's
So you
what
were frying
cooks.
the circuits. Yeah, you were
Yeah,
frying them. Yeah.
yeah. So having, I had a meter that I could check the standing wave ratio on the fly. Every time I keyed up, it told me what the ratio was, and it had a dial that I could adjust. So if I got ice buildup or rain or something, having some kind of problem with the environmental conditions, I could set that and make adjustments on the fly, so I never burned up another radio. I really liked that thing.
Mhm.
And it was
Lesson
simple.
learned.
Yeah, it was like back then it was like a $30 little meter. It wasn't any real expenditure at all. And it saved numerous radios.
Yep.
Yeah. And yeah, just a little bit of knowledge and a good radio. Ham radio, well, excuse me, CB radio. I think if I recall right, the reason that CB radios got popular, besides the trucker movies, etc., it was a means emergency communication. That's what it was for. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mike. Isn't that what it was all about?
To the highest extent, yes. To the greatest extent, yes. I've known. Well, for instance, I just sold a 1966 Robin executive radio I had bought from a guy 2 years ago. I bought at a sale out in farm country, not far from here. I got talking with the guy. They had 30 radios for sale, and between my partner and I, we bought them all. But we found out that starting in 1966, this man, their father, ran a TV repair business, and he was dispatched via CB radio. They had CBs at home and CBs in the shop and CBs in all their vans. So it initially started very much as a business radio.
I remember that. I remember that. Yeah, because cop cars used to have CBs, and you'd see service cars or vehicles. I remember that now. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
I remember.
And then in the 70s, when the truckers discovered radio, thanks again to Smokey and the Bandit, among other sources, and CB took off, and it grew way beyond just business and emergency communications.
So, Toby, what do you see out on the road now? It's been a minute since I've been out on the road with the CB. What are drivers doing? Are there many guys on the CB, and is there any etiquette and culture around the radio anymore?
My CB's on all the time. It's off now because I don't want it bleeding over, but driving down the road, it's on, and you hear some chatter. It just depends, but the majority of the stuff you hear is what's going on up there, what's going on that northbound side, or, well, we nicknamed Channel 19 Sesame Street for a reason. And that's the other thing you hear is just the dullard side of the trucking industry, as far as the things that people talk about, and just getting on there and being, I'll say, silly. That's a good word. Silly is a good word.
Much better than the word I was thinking of.
Probably the same word. But yeah, there's not a whole lot of the brotherhood, the camaraderie going on. It's complaining or griping or what's going on up there, or stuff like. And it's not as prevalent as it used to be, man. It used to be everybody. Like a lot of times, like you see my cord. I'll give you an example. This is how far the CB industry's come out. I don't know about you, if you ever saw one, but my CB mic is held up by a 6-inch bungee cord. I'm old school. Okay. And that's what we do. You take the screw up here in the cabinet, you unscrew it, you put the one end of the bungee cord up there, you tighten it down, you hook the other end to the back of your mic, and guess what? You got a mic. Well, now they've had it out for a few years. It's called a gear keeper. And basically what it is it's that exact same thing, but you pay $20 for it, and I paid 89 cents for a bungee cord.
Yep.
It's not like
thank God for free enterprise, huh?
Well, it's a brilliant thing. I mean, you let go and it snaps back. Oh, wait, my bungee cord does the same thing. Never mind. Just don't have a co-driver and then me standing over there because you can hit them in the head with it. But no, the really, it's the traffic's not like it used to be on there. It's not as, you don't hear as many people or as many voices. You hear them, sometimes. A lot of times, you'll see drivers that just don't have a CB at all, which is become more popular than I thought. But I'm really glad to hear Mike say that the popularity is not waning as much as I was afraid it was. That makes me feel good, man. It really does, because now where they're at, I don't know if they're not talking or if they just turn their CBs on when they have to. But either way, man, I would love to see us get back to using this the way we used to, and just It was fun.
It was. It was
fun, man.
And I noticed when I was going coast to coast that when I would get out into central Nebraska and beyond, in Wyoming and Colorado, across Utah and Nevada, there was a lot more people, a lot more drivers on the radio using it for the things that we used to use it for. The road reports, et cetera, and just chatting, because, you're out there in the middle of nowhere. The guys that ran out there a lot more across the deserts had the radios, probably because it was much more needed out there in no cell phone country. So it might be a product of you being regional, East Coast-ish, east of the Mississippi running, that you're running into CB. That would be interesting. So that gives me an idea. Anybody that's listening to this show, give us some comments. What's your experience with the CBs? If you're watching the show, do you run a radio? What kind of radio do you run? What kind of advice do you have for people? Give us some feedback, make some comments here. You can always find us on Facebook. The 6 Million Mile Show is on Facebook, Instagram. Toby, you're the social media guy. Where are we?
We're on Facebook at the 6 Million Mile Show. We're on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at the same heading, the 6 Million Mile Show. And thanks to you, we are now on Patreon, like you said earlier. So,
yes, yeah. So it's kind of like leaving a tip at the diner. You sit down at the diner and you have a good meal, and somebody bends your ear for a while, and you throw $5 up on the counter. That's what Patreon's for. If you like the show and enjoy what we're doing, say thank you a little bit, and throw us a little coin once in a while. It's all right. And yeah, check the Patreon out. It's patreon.com/the 6 Million Mile Show. We'll put some comments in the put a link in the comments, and Mike we'll put a link to your eBay store down in the comments of this show too. Do you have anything else that you want to cover that we didn't, Mike? Anything else you've got to say on the topic?
I don't think so. I mean, we covered a lot of stuff. Do
you still love radios as much as you used to?
I'm sorry?
Do you still love CB radios and radio operation as much as you used to?
Oh, yes, very much so. Very much so. I'm not
that's
on
cool.
the road, but
that's cool to hear, man. It really is.
Mike has been trying to get me to get my ham license since we met in January of 75. And I think probably sometime around March of 75, he started bugging me to get my ham license, and I still haven't done it.
I don't understand that. Mike, I don't understand that. Why would he need a license to be what he already is, a ham?
Yeah. I can't argue with that.
Wow. All right. Thanks.
You can feel the love.
I can feel the love coming through this internet connection.
Nothing but love for you, baby.
Well, that's great. Toby, do you have anything else that you want to throw in here?
No, I'm really glad that Mike, though, because I learned a lot on this episode. I really did. Good. There's stuff I didn't know, and I hopefully it's the whole goal for this show is to share. To share knowledge, and he dropped some knowledge on us today. He dropped some stuff on me I had no clue about, and so I'm definitely the better for being a part of this. So no, I don't have a thing, man. Just thanks, Mike. Thanks so much for being on the show, and wow, you need to think of some more guests, man. Really, Crackerbox, think of some more guests, because I don't have any friends.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, Mike, thank you so much for agreeing to be on the show with us. It's really good to see you again. It's been a minute. Good to see you. Good to see you, Toby.
Thank you so much for asking me to participate. It was a lot of fun. Good to see you, my old frild.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Well,
what about your new friend?
Yeah.
And my new friend, Toby. Sorry, brother.
We love you, Toby.
I'll pout. I'm cute when I pout.
That's debatable. Well, anyway, everybody, thank you very much for joining us here at the 6 Million Mile Show. I am one of your co-hosts, Crackerbox Jimmy.
And I'm your other co-host, Trucker Toby. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being a part of this. Thank you for the love. And as always, I am 1010 on the side.
Bone shaker, rattle my head. You got a Jake that's not enough to wake the dead. I said, bone shaker, tell me the truth. Swear you're running on whiskey under 20 proof.